Farage.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Well, crime, it's real, it's growing. Just have a little think about this. The year ending March 2015 saw a 3% increase in recorded crime in England and Wales. And then the year ending March 2016 saw a further 8% increase in recorded crime in England and Wales. And then the year ending March 2017 saw a 10% increase in recorded crime. And now we see, actually in the last year, ending March 18, there's been an 11% increase on crime year on year. So just think about that over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. You know, we're looking at a 25% increase in recorded crime. That's a very, very real number. Without wanting to baffle you with statistics, you know, we're looking at homicides, murders and manslaughters up by 12%. We're looking at knife crime up by 16%. We're looking at recorded robberies up by, unbelievably, 30%. And I wonder, are these just statistics, lies, damn lies, and statistics, or is this actually impacting and really making you feel that crime is rising and you're more and more concerned about it? Tell me, has this rising crime impacted your life in any way? And if you've been a victim of crime in the last 12 months, please call me on 0345 6060 973. Obviously, if something's going to court, we better not talk about that. Maybe someone close to you has been a victim of crime in the last 12 months, in which case text to 84850. Or if you believe, actually, do you know what? This is all nonsense. Life is better and safer than it was. These are just figures. It isn't that crime's gone up, it's that the recorded crime has gone up. And if that's how you feel, please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch me on Facebook and please comment there too. And it is interesting that this really very big rise in crime over the last 4 years is happening under a Conservative government, because traditionally it's the Conservative government that we've always thought of as being tough on crime. Now, I know Tony Blair tried to take that mantra, of course, when he was PM, saying he was going to be tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. But it's normally the Conservatives that have prided themselves on being tough on this issue. And I wonder, why? Why is crime rising the way that it is? It could be that we're reporting it more than we were, but I doubt it. I personally think, my own view is, I think it's got so much to do with drugs, so much to do with the gang crime associated with drugs, so much to do also with a breakdown in many ways in the family unit, in society, in male role models. Gang violence, I think in many parts of London particularly is awful. But it's interesting because we keep talking about London, London knife crime figures. These figures I've just quoted today are for England and Wales, and it's 16% across England and Wales. So this rise in crime, this rise in robberies, this rise in knife crime, this rise in murder and manslaughter is absolutely not concentrated solely in London. It is indeed happening across the whole of the country. Tell me, is this now impacting your life in a way you never thought it would? Let's go down to Medway and speak to Michael. Good evening, Michael.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm okay. So tell me, has this increase in crime impacted your life, Michael? Is it real?
Yes. Yeah, there's been a massive spate of van robberies and car theft in my area. My parents actually got their car stolen about 6 months ago. The guys broke in, they drugged our dog. We got a Rottweiler. They put some meat through with ketamine in it, drugged the dog, stole the laptop, got the car keys. I was in the house for 8 minutes. Stole one car, couldn't get the other one started, and they came back again to try again. It's been going on for months and months around here now. They nicked the cars to order. It's a Mercedes. They stole it. It's over in Eastern Europe now. It's been going.
You say Eastern Europe, Michael. I mean, are you suggesting this was an Eastern European gang that was doing it?
No. These guys, there were 2 guys from Essex and another one from Kent. They nicked about 3 or 4 other cars that night. They're connected in some way to these gangs, and they go overboard. They go and get sent overboard.
Okay, and Michael, How did you feel the police response was to this car being stolen?
It was slow to start with. I didn't hear anything for months. It took absolutely ages. But I did keep on at them. But I did actually finally get some arrests, only because they had done so many, they could link them together.
Right. Right.
But the guys got like a few years. One of them was like well known, and one of them was already.
So ultimately,
for another one.
So it sounds, Michael, a bit like a police success story. This.
It was actually for once, yeah. But there's been loads of van thefts around, all tools and they're getting nicked, and they're not doing anything about that. They can't actually do anything. They caught one guy with an actual, like, his whole dining room was full of tools, different tools, but because they couldn't prove that he knew they were stolen, that they can't do anything. They can't do anything. There's been massive...
Any thoughts, Michael? Any thoughts, Michael, on why crime is going up like this?
Well, I agree with you with what you were just saying, really. If society as a general rule, I think we're all going totally degenerate and downhill. There's a lot of gangs going around. There's stabbings going on around here. There's gangs coming down from London, selling drugs down here. There's gang violence down here. There's young lads getting stabbed up from around here that are getting involved with gang crime from kids up in London.
Would more police, Michael... Everywhere. Would more police, because, we've had declining police on the streets, we're now down to 122,000 police in England and Wales, down another 1,000 from the year before. Would more police on the streets and longer prison sentences make a difference in your view?
Absolutely, but at the end of the day, the police are just, the physical end of the PC brigade up in Parliament that seem to do everything they can to protect the bleeding criminals, and the actual victims are the ones that have got to try and prove their innocence, really, and prove everything to them.
You sound a bit You sound a bit disenchanted, Michael, with the whole thing.
I am, yeah. The whole government, the whole situation, everything from Brexit to society, and in general, I've got the ump with a lot of it, to be honest with you, Nigel.
Okay, no, I understand that. Michael, thank you very much for your call. Well, Michael there, whose family, direct victims of very clearly organised gang crime, but, hey, the police got on top of it. Texts and tweets I get, oh, come on. The dramatic reduction in spending on policing has a major impact on law and order. Don't be an idiot. You can't get blood out of a stone. When you reduce police spending, you get more crime. Jim, I wasn't trying to argue the opposite. I've made the case that police numbers keep on going down. I'm told in the case of the Metropolitan Police that at any one moment in time, no more than 4% of the Met are actually on the streets of London. So that implies bureaucracy and all sorts of other problems. Yes, my brother in Hemel Hempstead got robbed. Next door CCTV saw the robber. He was known to the police. However, my dad's jewellery has not been retrieved. And yeah, there is a very human side to this. If you lose possessions, it can be very, very hurtful and upsetting for people. And violent crime, well, of course, that can have an even more serious effect. But it's interesting, Michael, talking about the gangs going down to Medway, coming from London and elsewhere. He mentioned drugs in that. I've got no proof of this, but I have this feeling that drugs are at the heart of a lot of what is going on here. Please tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. Let's go to Valerie, who's calling from Teddington. Good evening, Valerie.
Good evening. Well, I'm a victim of crime because late May this year, I usually go shopping on a Tuesday morning, so I feel that I was being watched because when I got back, the glass in the front door was broken and they got in and they'd stolen all my jewellery, my family stuff, my grandmother's stuff, all of it. And I suppose I had to do it fast, so every box was gone. It might be a tin that had biscuits in. They didn't obviously look in boxes. Some of them have got pencils and pens in. The whole lot was gone. Nothing left at all.
Oh, Valerie, that's a very heartbreaking story. Were you insured to any degree over this?
Well, I was insured, but my engagement ring, which was a long while ago, and now would have been very valuable. It would have been much more than the money I got for all of this. So
but then it's not just about money, is it?
No, it wasn't, because a lot of it was sentimental stuff. Anyway, yes. The police were lovely. They were there within 20 minutes. Very good. And they said, virtually, there's no chance you'll ever see that again. They suggested that might be Eastern European gangs, which were only targeting jewellery. That's the only thing they wanted. Just jewellery.
And that was... OK, and that's what the police said, is it?
Indeed. And they said, your stuff will be gone by now. See, there's a getaway car up the road waiting.
Well, Valerie, one of the... I've said this before, one of the problems of letting in a lot of countries to the European Union who had not made the full transformation to Western democracies, as a lot of them very dominated by gang culture, and this has made gang crime worse. Although it even includes Albania, which is not part of the European Union, but there are some real issues with that. No, Valerie, thank you for sharing that with us, and I'm very, very sorry to hear your story. Crime is going up because punishment does not fit the crime. If someone murders someone, they should be jailed for life with no chance of parole. Instead, they get freed after 8 years. The whole judicial system needs sorting. But I do understand the need for longer prison sentences. I do understand the need for more police on the streets. But there is an argument, folks, that actually is dealing with the symptoms of crime and not with the causes of crime. And I think there are some societal reasons that crime is going up. I think the explosion of drug use is a reason they're going up. And yes, an open door to criminal gangs from parts of Eastern and Southern Europe has also made a difference. That's my view. Come and tell me I'm wrong. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. A recorded increase of 11% in crime in England and Wales over the course of the last year, following on from the last 3 years of rises in crime. And I'm asking you whether you've been a victim of crime. Have these figures impacted upon your life, or is it just that more crime's being reported? And Mick, rather by text, says what I think. He says, since people rarely report crime these days due to lack of police response, the real figures must be massive. They have lost the streets. Mrs May and her stubborn refusal to resource them is to blame. And it might be partly to blame, Mick. It's not wholly to blame. But Mick, I think you're right. I think now there are vast numbers of crimes, particularly thefts of all sorts, that we would have reported to the police 10, 15 years ago that we simply don't bother to report. So I think, I'm with you, I think the official crime figures massively underestimate the truth of where we are. That's my feeling. Martin is calling from Aylesbury, a new caller to this show. Martin, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you. So has this rise in crime impacted on your life there in Aylesbury, or are they just figures that don't mean much?
Not impacted on me personally, but I just personally think year on year taxes go up, our rates go up, etc. But what we get in return is reducing. We don't get the level of service from our police. I'm not going to say anything bad about the police, because I think they do their best in what is a very awkward situation with terrorism the way it is and everything else. But I think it's massively under-resourced, like the NHS. I'd like to know where the money goes, because if we're paying more in, why are the resources not available? You know, whether it be the military, whether it be the police. I just think it's systematic of this country, the way it is at the moment, that we seem to cater more for other people than look at our own yard as such.
Well, we have to, Martin, of course, we have a rapidly rising population, which means that in terms of providing public services, whether they're policing or health or whatever they are, we keep having to provide a lot more resource every single year, because there are simply more of us. Martin, in any way, do you feel less safe than you did 5 years ago in Aylesbury?
I feel less safe, definitely, but that's not the police's fault. I do agree with you that there is maybe more reporting being reported differently, and I totally agree with you that I think a lot of us do not report maybe crime that would have been reported years ago.
Yeah, we just don't bother, do we? We just don't bother because we can't see what the point is.
No, and you know, there's the aspect of, you know, it affects your insurance premiums.
Wow, isn't this the point? Isn't this the point? You know, if you report, you know, a relatively small theft of something, and the insurance company pays out, what's that going to do to your premium for the next few years?
Exactly. You know, and they're not cheap enough as it is, and then all of a sudden your postcoded area becomes a bad area to live in as well. So it affects the house price. It affects everything. So, as I say, I just personally think, you know, the way things are going at the moment, I don't feel as safe as I feel we should be. We should be safe to walk the streets at night, but more and more we hear of people getting attacked. Look what's going on in London, knife crime, etc. I just think...
Martin, I'm with you. Knife crime in London, acid attacks. Am I more concerned about safety in London with my children going out of an evening than I was a few years ago? Do you know what? I am. Let's ask Stephen in Barnet, another new caller to this show, how he feels about this. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Good evening.
Hi there. So, have you been a victim of crime? Do you feel the impact of these figures or not?
Certainly. I'd like to try and summarise it as quickly as I can. In the space of 10 days, a family business associated with us, myself, was robbed, and they stole our safe, and nothing was reported, despite we have CCTV. Yes, they were wearing balaclavas, but we actually identified them to come into the premises 3 days on the trot, and it matches the description. In fact, Nigel, they were wearing the same shoes. 2 days later, my aunt, who lives in another part of London, had her car stolen. The neighbour has CCTV over the road, saw that they came to break in, and they failed. They went away for an hour, returned with a Costa coffee at 4 a.m, Nigel, and then eventually succeeded and took the car. And then 3 days later, my girlfriend, who lives in another part of London again, comes home to find that her room has been ambushed. They've broken in through the panel of the door and stolen up to £10,000 worth of jewellery, sentimental jewellery handed down through generations. And that was in the space of 10 days, Nigel. So, and the response is, which I'm sure you can obviously guess, is we have, well, actually, this was the response. We're dealing with far more serious crimes at the moment, so there's not really much we can do. And in fact, sorry to cut you off, Nigel, well, one more thing. On the final crime, it took them 72 hours to attend the premises, so my girlfriend had to sleep pretty much on the couch downstairs because they couldn't attend to her.
Stephen, I've heard that again and again. A relation of mine was burgled. They broke a window. They cut themselves badly and bled. And the police said, oh, well, just cover the blood up with cellophane in your kitchen, and we'll come around tomorrow or the next day and take a look at it, which didn't go down very well, as you can imagine. But is it, Stephen, that there are just so many crimes that it's almost impossible for the police to respond quickly?
Well, do you know what I think it is, Nigel? I'd love to talk to you for ages, and it's a pleasure to speak to you, by the way.
Thank you.
I think it's a domino effect, Nigel. So what happens, and this is a massive generalisation here, I reckon a couple of hoodlums that perhaps rob the business or break into my partner's house say, you know what, I just robbed that place. It was pretty easy, got 10 grand worth of stuff. Information is spread, which has led to that multiplying, and therefore that's why there's many crimes going on. And I just want to say one more thing very quickly on knife crime. I've just got 1 second. Thank you very much.
Go on.
A particular constable that came to attend one of the 3 crimes said to us, knife crime has gone up 70% in his offices alone ever since stop and search was taken away. And children as young as 10 years of age, Nigel, are carrying knives as big enough, like, almost as big as them.
Stephen, the stop and search thing is ridiculous. The police pulling right back from stop and search for fear of being thought to be racist rather than worrying about preventing crime. Stephen, thank you very much indeed for your call. Now, Josie has a solution on Facebook. She says, why not national service in this country to reduce crime? Well, Josie, whether you're right or not, I have to tell you, I think that is a minority view. You might be right, but I don't think many people support it. James on Facebook says more prison time isn't effective either. You only need to look at the US. We need to mend broken Britain, give the police proper powers again, and have them on the beat, not filling out forms. Well, James, where are the Conservatives? After all, Mrs May was the longest-serving Home Secretary for the last 150 years until she became Prime Minister, and it is under the Tories that we're seeing very, very sharp increases in crime, and particularly sharp increases in violent crime and murder. John in Islington, another new caller to the show. John, how are you?
Hi, Nigel. Very nice to talk to you. I want to explain the situation in my area very briefly, if I can, Nigel. And this is around Islington, not far from King's Cross. Back in January, I was standing on a corner outside a pub and I was waiting on my girlfriend and her friend to come. They just finished the night shift, a long day shift. And we went into the pub, had a quick beer, but just before we did, someone saw me on my phone, a young youth, tried to grab my phone, only I had it held quite tightly. Went into the pub for a pint, came out, my girlfriend's bike had been stolen, smashed. Now, to make matters worse, the young youths around here who routinely steal bikes to do their drug carrying, not only, they weren't smart enough to get rid of the bike and sell it on eBay, they routinely used the bike in our area for the following days, almost taunting us with impunity. They didn't care about the police being reported. They didn't care about police coming to them. They just think it's our street, we can do what we want, who cares about the police? Can you imagine how infuriating that is for you to see someone stealing your own bike and cycling it up and down your street? Well, and this is happening every day.
Rather more than infuriating, I would suggest. And John, in your view, how much of this is to do with drugs?
It is completely 100% to do with drugs. These kids, as young as 10, I know that the local the head of this drugs gang in this area is like 15, 16, and the police know where he lives. And they are carrying drugs. That's all they do because they don't go to school. Every day they just carry drugs, and they're the drug runners. I'm not emphasising with young kids, but you can understand how lucrative it is for them. But it's completely to do with drugs. They're doing drug runs on these bikes. It's horrendous. It's for the local community. It's so disheartening, Nigel. It really is.
John, I'm not surprised, but I'm also, you very much, this is my hunch. My hunch is that the drugs epidemic is hopelessly out of control. It's impossible to police just because of the sheer scale of it. And I think so much of the crime is to do with drugs, gangs and money. And I'm very tempted to think we should look hard at Portugal and Switzerland and places that have decriminalised drugs to ask ourselves whether it does actually reduce crime by doing that.
I think there's a lot to be said for at least looking at it, Nigel. Why this idea is just, it's not going to have let's look at it. It can't get any worse.
Yeah. No, John, do you know what? I agree with that. It couldn't get any worse. Let's have a Royal Commission onto this. Let's study Portugal particularly. Let's see whether it's led to fewer crimes taking place in streets like John's in Islington. John, thank you very much indeed for your call. Nigel, it's poverty that's the crux of rising crime. Well, maybe it is poverty. I don't know. And there must be a link between poverty and crime, but not an increase in crime and the scale that we're talking about here, because it's massive. Crime is up. Recorded crime is up in England and Wales by 25% over the course of the last 4 years. They are mind-blowing numbers. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. It is now 7:30 and recorded crime in England and Wales is up over 25% since the general election of 2015. This all happening under the watch of a Tory party who traditionally had always wanted themselves to be seen as being tough on crime. And I'm asking you, have these figures impacted upon you? Have they changed your life and the way you think? And what do we think the causes of this problem really are? Now, the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, of course, resigned after Chequers, shortly followed by Boris Johnson, and Davis was replaced by Dominic Raab, which I have to say rather surprised me, because he was a member of Leave Means Leave, and he's been making the argument, for Brexit to be consistent with what he and others campaigned for, but he has accepted a job as the new Brexit Secretary, and he's been over in Brussels today to meet that charming Michel Barnier. Raab says that he's actually rather pleased with the way the talks are progressing. Let's hear him.
We've made a lot of progress in the withdrawal agreement, particularly on citizens' rights, both UK citizens here on the continent, but also EU citizens in the UK, and indeed on the implementation period. There are still gaps that we need to fill, but we've taken stock and made some really good progress, and I look forward to making more progress today. It is also now vital that we make progress on the establishment of a framework for our future partnership. I've come out today to discuss in the detailed proposals that we've got in our white paper that you will have seen, and I'm looking forward to, with renewed energy, vigour and vim, looking at the detail of all of this. As Michelle has told us, the clock is ticking, and so I'm looking forward to intensifying, heating up the negotiations and making sure we're in the best position to get the best deal.
Well, he sounds very optimistic and very bullish, doesn't he? I'm not quite sure why. He also said that he's quite prepared to have meetings over the month of August. Well, bad luck, Dominic. They'll all be on a beach somewhere in the Mediterranean, is my guess. And all of this comes on the same day that the IMF have actually issued a report saying that the UK leaving the European Union with no trade deal, no specific trade deal of any kind other than WTO rules, could have a tough impact on the economies of Europe and particularly of Ireland, and also on the day when the European Commission have talked about the possibility of a no-deal Brexit. So both sides now talking a bit more about a no-deal Brexit. I haven't got a problem with a no-deal Brexit. I still stick to the view that no deal is better than a bad deal. But whether the UK Parliament would actually allow a no-deal Brexit is quite another story. So anyway, Dominic Raab now in post and appears to be happy to be supporting a much, much softer form of Brexit, as in the Chequers Accord, than the one he'd campaigned and talked about before. But hey, that's life. Let's get back to crime. Have these increases in crime really impacted on your life, or are they just statistics? Let's ask Peter, who's calling from Golders Green and is a new caller to the show. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Nigel. About 6 weeks ago, I woke up in the morning, looked out the window, and my car disappeared. Now, I decided to do a little bit of investigation and check the internet to see how many cars a year are stolen in the UK. And I was absolutely horrified to see the figure. I wonder if you can hazard a guess what that might be. Oh, God, you got me in trouble now, Peter, haven't you? I know.
You really got me. It's got to be 20,000. Maybe it's more.
20,000? Try 360,000.
No.
You check
360,000 stolen cars every year.
1,000 cars every day are stolen.
I can't believe it.
Well, I couldn't believe it till I saw it with my own eyes on the internet. Unless the internet is lying.
Well, the internet, I mean, it does depend a bit on your sources here, Peter, but that is a mind-blowing figure.
That's a mind-blowing figure, absolutely. And the problem is nowadays that once they get access to the car, they have access to the engine. And they don't even have to break the window, break the steering lock, hotwire the car, and within 24 hours, the car is probably on a boat crossing the channel. Now, number one, I don't understand why anyone can take a car, probably, without ownership documents over the channel.
Can you imagine, Peter, if I'm driving through Eurotunnel, which I regularly do, every month, often twice a month, you've got to show a passport. But I guess the argument would be if you had to show driving licenses and car registration documents, it would all take a lot longer. I guess that's the argument, is it?
You only need a V5 with your name on it and your passport.
Okay. No, look, I think you're probably right. And do you suspect, Peter, suspect that the majority of these cars are going abroad? Is that what you think?
Those people are getting a £50,000 or £60,000 car because they're not going to steal a car that's worth 5 or 10, a lot cheaper. And one has to ask ourselves, why are the car manufacturers not doing something about it? Well, the simple answer is they sell 360,000 more cars a year in the UK.
Interesting. Peter, it's an amazing figure. Thank you for the call. I'd love somebody to come on and validate Peter's figure. Maybe somebody who works for the police who can come on using an anonymous name and tell me whether Peter is right. Tell me whether 1,000 cars a day in the UK are being stolen. I find that, I have to say, difficult to believe. On Twitter, I get police pay is too low. Why risk your life multiple times a day for pay that is barely better than a Tesco cashier? Chris, well, that's perhaps a very fair question. Sophie is calling from Banstead, another new caller to this show. Good evening, Sophie.
Hello, Nigel. You have to forgive me, I'm a little bit nervous.
Oh, Sophie, we're all nervous, don't worry. No, listen, we're having a chat. Forget about that. So has these rising crime figures, Sophie, have they impacted your life?
Well, it wasn't an actual person. I suppose not a person. My mum was attacked by a dog 3.5 weeks ago. So I suppose it was a person because the owner obviously had a dog that was very violent. It was so bad that she had to go to hospital. She had to have 2 operations and a skin graft, and the plastic surgeon said it was worst dog bite that they've ever seen. So
sounds horrible. Sounds really horrible.
It was awful. It's terrible. She's really upset about it because her leg's pretty much sort of disfigured now. So anyway, we called the police just after it happened, and they took all the details down all that we had. But my mum got a phone call the next day while she was in hospital with this awful thing on her leg, to say that they were closing the case because they couldn't find the lady. But it didn't really seem like anything had been done. Do you mean they couldn't find the owner of the dog? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, well, so the owner disappeared. She had 3 dogs. She had 3 Staffy-type dogs that were all quite aggressive, and only one of them, and they weren't muzzled, and only one of them was on the lead. And one of them attacked my mum when she was actually trying to help this lady. So the police closed the case. So we took it into our own hands and sort of used Facebook and Twitter to try and sort of get some information. Couldn't really get any. It turned out about 3 weeks later, a friend of ours was walking her dog and bumped into this lady with 2 Staffies, who actually matched the description, and she spoke to her and she confirmed that it was her, and she was really sorry and gave all her contact details. But I think she was really sorry that she got caught because there was she didn't really make any effort to contact my mum.
And Sophie, did you feel that the police rather gave up on this case?
Yeah. When we told the police, so the police took her information, they called her, and she said, "Oh yeah, I've had the dog put down." And they called back my partner and was like, "Well, she's put the dog down. What are we supposed to do?" But bearing in mind that my mum had this awful injury, so my partner's really had to fight. He sent the pictures over to the police, and the police have kind of said, "Oh, well, we didn't realise that it was that bad." So
horrible. But Staffies can be nice, Sophie, too, can't they?
Oh, I love dogs, but they say they're dealing with it, but nothing's been done. And I mean, it's been nearly a month since it happened, and I just feel a bit let down. I mean, I've never really I've been lucky enough that I've never had to really use the police before, but I'm kind of thinking, if anything else ever happens, I'm a bit worried.
Well, it could be, Sophie. It could be that they're simply overwhelmed by this huge rise in crime, huge rise in reported crime in England and Wales. It's well over 25% in the last 4 years as their numbers decline. Sophie, thank you for telling us that distressing story. Uma is calling from Hackney, a new caller to this show. Uma, good evening.
Hello there, Nigel.
Hi.
Actually, Ume. Sorry about that. It's actually Ume.
Uma. Okay. Well, I did my best. So, come on, tell me. Has rising crime impacted you living in Hackney?
It has, but I've actually seen it over a long period of time. See, I initially lived in Tottenham for about 16 years, and I was lucky enough to have a father who knew how to prevent me from getting too heavily involved in the youth culture at that time. Now, my honest opinion, from what I've seen, not just from my past, but from my younger siblings, for example, or my cousins, my little younger cousins, I tend to mentor. I'm also a bit of a football coach, so I mentor them, is that they lack strong male role models.
Role models, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Good, strong male role models, of course. I see what they do on a daily basis. So a typical example might be a child will come home from school, mum's, doing her best, she's cooking maybe, and the child is being entertained by watching television or, partaking in watching a movie or listening to music while mum's cooking, which is understandable and fair enough. But the influences that the child is getting from these negative portrayals and messages and images is exactly that. They end up searching out male role models, and the only male role models that are close to a young person is going to be in their school, and that tends to be the tall one, the strong one, the one that's got the most charisma. He might not be the most intelligent, but he's the most influential, and they tend to follow his lead. And he feeds off. Maybe he listens to drill music. That's a type of music where they're constantly talking about gangs and attacking other gangs and so on and so forth.
Horrendous stuff. Mate, tell me something. How much, and you've lived in Tottenham, you're now living in Hackney, how much of this gang culture how much of it is coming from drugs, in your opinion?
I think. To be quite honest, I think there's more important factors. It would probably make up about, I don't know, if I was to think randomly, maybe 20%. But you have to take into consideration there are so many other variants and factors into why these things are happening. So drugs, it might be one thing, but it's nowhere near the biggest issue. I personally believe, like I said, the biggest issue is the lack of male role models in the household.
No, well, you've made the point very powerfully and very well, and thank you very much indeed for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. It is now 7:47. Now, Peter from Golders Green highlighted the rapid rise of car thefts, not robberies from cars, but actual car thefts. And I have to say, I have a feeling that these new keyless systems make a big difference. Maybe the manufacturers could be doing a lot more. What are the true figures? He thought it could be as many as 1,000 cars a day. Well, that's not what the official figures show at the moment, Peter. What they do show is that theft of vehicles was 82,000 last year, up 40% from the year before. So, Peter, you're on the right track, and maybe the reality is that it's much higher than 82,000, but that is the official figure. Theft from vehicles increased 14%, to 656,000 recorded incidents, and I'm sure there are a load more incidents that simply don't get reported. So I think the direction of travel was right. The figures may just have been slightly over-egged. And let's hope, Peter, they don't reach the numbers that you were talking about. Anthony is calling from Romford. Anthony, has rising crime had an impact on your life?
Oh, my days. Hi, Nigel. It's my
Hello.
I'm actually speaking to you.
Welcome. You're a new caller. Mostly new callers today. I guess this subject's brought some different callers. Have you been impacted by this?
Yeah, basically, crime nowadays is actually on a rise. And a few days ago, in my area, there is a broad day. There are some group of men. They max themselves on a bike and basically went to my kids' school, trying to snatch the children from their parents, and their attention was basically on the women. So this happened in broad daylight, to the extent that they had to have police, parading the area for a few days.
Anthony, were these bikes or mopeds?
Mopeds. Some of them are mopeds. Mopeds. Yeah, because mopeds, when they commit this crime, it's very easy for them to go through narrow ways and just to escape from being caught. And my main attention is because already we have a degenerated society. And I think attention has actually been moved away from where it's supposed to be focused. And I think the government also has given some of its section powers that they don't even check. For instance, the social services. And my concern is because this generation is already faulty. But my main concern is about the generation that are yet to come. Because the issue is if the foundation is faulty, then whatever you build on that foundation will be faulty. So, and you see young children threatening their parents, telling them, if you can't tell me not to do this, if you tell me, then I'm going to lie. I'll go to school and lie that you did something to me. And, once they do that, the social come down heavily on the parents. And at this junction, even parents are very, very scared of actually, correcting their kids.
Yeah, that's right. And they say, Anthony, I know my rights. That's what they say now, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's the slogan.
When I was young, when I was young, we used to say it's a free country, but now kids say I know my rights. And you're. I mean, I can't imagine, Anthony, being a school teacher these days. Worried that someone's going to make a vexatious complaint against me. I'd be terrified of it. But Anthony, you're talking about a societal breakdown, an attitudinal breakdown. I mean, the one thing, and I think you're right. The one thing for certain is this is not going to be turned around anytime soon, is it?
No. Not at all, because you see, they said there's an increase in the amount of cars that are being stolen. Because at the end of the day, all these criminals, they need to fund their because I see it as a business. It is their business. You understand? So they need to fund this business, and they will go to any length to actually fund this business we are talking about. And I think the government needs to really come down on these people. And I believe that every kid that is actually growing up, the family is the first point of contact. I think it is high time the government actually, help the parents to have a say in the way they bring up their kids.
Anthony, I don't disagree with a word of that. Thank you for your call, and quite depressing, really, what Anthony's saying about this sort of societal breakdown. He mentioned moped crime. Interestingly, I get this. I can no longer get proper motorcycle insurance in London due to the horrific rise in the thefts of them, and I have to say I'm not surprised by that at all. I used to teach unarmed combat to special forces on London streets. I feel unsafe and vulnerable. Goodness me, well, if you feel unsafe and vulnerable, what does that mean the rest of us are supposed to feel? The problem with asking the police to patrol our streets and fight crime is that we need to be armed to do this, says Spencer. Spencer, I am for arming the police, particularly after the London Bridge attack, when, a very brave policeman with a plastic baton attacked those terrorists and got stabbed in the eye for doing so. If he'd had a gun, he'd have saved lives. So I do believe that. But that incident, arming the police is not going to stop an increase in knife crime. Arming the police is not going to stop a rise in robbery. Arming the police is not directly going to stop a rise in things like manslaughter, I don't think. Let's go to Dan in Bristol, another new caller to the show. Dan, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, has rising crime impacted your life in Bristol, Dan?
It has, yes. I mean, I'm 22 years old and I run my own small business. And I've noticed quite recently there's a large influx of credit card fraud. So it was about 6 months ago, I received a phone call from a gentleman saying that he was buying something from me for a present to somebody else. So he paid over the phone by my credit card terminal, and he asked me to send it to another address, not the registered card address. So rather naively, I proceeded to do so. And I received a phone call from a credit card company sort of a few weeks later saying that the chargeback was being taken out of my account. So obviously it transpired that this man had just stolen the credit card details from an elderly couple up north and asked for it to be sent to an address in London, which obviously I did unknowingly. And I think these sort of crimes are an issue because the police have no way of dealing with them. There's nothing they can do. And I think a lot of crime nowadays and the way it's committed is causing problems for the police.
Yes, and it's also, Dan, and we haven't really mentioned this point tonight, only briefly, it's also causing misery for millions, isn't it? Every single year. Upset, grief, really, really unpleasant. Do you feel, Dan, looking ahead, do you feel depressed about this? Do you think things are going to get even worse than they are?
If anything, I feel sorry for the police as much as anything because they don't stand a chance to go against these sort of crimes and to solve them because they've got no chance. And if they had more time to focus on the more violent crimes and the other issues in the country, instead of being bogged down by all these crimes that they're never going to be able to solve, then I think that would probably benefit everybody.
Yeah, and not to mention, Dan, bureaucracy as well. Form-filling bureaucracy, all those stories we get. And as I said earlier, Metropolitan Police in London, only 4% of that force on the streets as we speak right now. Dan, thank you. And Dan, talking about sophisticated levels of crime, very tough for the police to deal with. Huge problem, rising crime. Looks to me like it can only get worse over the course of the next few years. I am sorry to say. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'll be back on Sunday morning at 10. At 10 p.m. tonight, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thanks very much.